Yeah, welcome to this video. This is the third part of this mini-series about the London system and from the black side, battling the London system, which means all kinds of setup with bishop f4 quickly. In the first videos, the first one, we mainly looked at this kind of stuff where black played an early d7, d5. The second video was about black playing knight f6 and g6, so he's heading for King's Indian or Grunfeld mostly. And in this video we'll be looking at this version of the London system where black has played knight f6 and e6, so he's heading for a Nimzo, Queen's Indian, Bogo Indian type of setup. And here again, white can play bishop f4. Black has two principal ways to play this now. He can play at some point d5 anyway and transpose into a d4, d5 opening. But you don't have the possibility to get your bishop out as described in the first video. In the first video, my recommendation was to actually avoid the move e6 for a while, so that you at some point even can play bishop f5. So in the video here with e6, it's simply not possible to develop this bishop anymore. So I think as this is a key point in this opening, it's a good idea to take care about the bishop immediately and play b6. We are shadowing this piece. Of course, as mentioned, d5 is possible, but it leads to entirely different positions than I examined previously. So b6. White now usually plays e3 or c3. It's very similar. Bishop to b7, knight to d2, bishop e7, c3, castles. This is all very normal. White very often also plays h3, so this is basically all the same. You can interchange those moves and play various moves orders as white, but it leads to the same kind of position all the time. Now look at black's position. He's certainly content with his pieces here. Bishop on b7 is good, bishop on e7 is solid. So what about the center pawns, c and d pawn? What I actually like here to play is to play c5, keep the bishop, the pawn on d7 and move the bishop pawn here with c5. White usually goes for bishop d3, and here black has two ways to go about this. Okay, he's got more than two ways, but two ways I'd like to show briefly. The first one is what I play myself here, and this is to take on d4. I like to exchange on d4 here. White, in the vast majority of games, recaptures with the pawn, and we'll look at c takes d later. And after this, my recommendation is to set up a hedgehog formation with e6, d6, b6, and probably even a6. And this is in fact a pretty good setup for black here. The point is, if you look at this, that this wall of pawns pretty much hinders white from making any concrete progress here. Especially the d6, e6 pawns control the center nicely. And white doesn't have a really concrete idea how to improve his position. In fact, this is often a problem in this London system, positions that white can easily make 10 moves, 15 moves and have all his pieces out. But then you ask yourself, if you're white, okay, what am I attacking now? What is my big plan? And this is in fact the problem that white here faces. He doesn't have a ready-made plan in this position. Cannot really play for any meaningful pawn break. whereas black in fact has some ideas. One idea that black has is to push e5, and this can be prepared also. Let's just put a couple of moves on the board. Rook e1, rook e8, rook, let's say d1, bishop f8. This is a typical maneuver with this idea with e5 in mind, the rook on e8 being opposed to the queen. And sometimes you can play queen c7 to support this e5 move. And it's not so clear what white is doing here in this position. It's not like black is better, but you have ideas. You can push this pawn. Another idea could be as black to play b5 and control the c4 square. And also with b5 preparing knight b6 to d5. So you can combine all these ideas. But e5 especially can be a very tricky move for white to meet, as those pieces are all in all kinds of forks. Of course, black should play queen c7 first. So let's say here, and then e5 gets really it's a possibility coming up. Sometimes you can even play queen to c6 and prepare this move. For example, a4, queen c6 is not bad. What is white doing now? If he covers this, then you can even think about e5. I'm just want to show the ideas. I'm not sure if it is so great in this concrete position, but this is one idea to prepare this move. And it leads to a fighting position. The hedgehog here, in fact, is a bit different than other hedgehogs, as the d-pawn, which is usually on a half-open file, here is not on that half-open file. In fact, white doesn't have any pressure on pawns here, this pawn wall. I think this is a pretty good version of the hedgehog. Even if you don't play this in other kinds of openings, you should seriously consider this, as it's a very flexible setup, and you have some ideas, in fact. So let's return. And one thing you also need to look at least briefly, is if you take on d4, then white can also capture with the c-pawn. And this is something else, of course, because now the c-file is open. And my recommendation would be to play a setup with knight c6 and d6. You want to put the knight on c6 to block the c-file. A setup with knight d7 isn't so great, because it leaves the c-file open, and white maybe has chances like this to invade, and the knight on c6 simply blocks this. Something like this could be a possible continuation. Just put it on the board. And now black shouldn't play d5 really. This wouldn't be so great, but you can easily play something like this, queen to d7, and then try to double on the c-file. It's rather flexible, and white against this small center cannot use any of the center squares, so black is fairly solid. It's pretty similar to this hedgehog formation that I showed before. Only on the c-file it is there's always the possibility of some exchanges later, so it's not as unbalanced as the other position. In fact, it is a question here in this whole setup: when should black take on d4? A case could be made, in fact, if you look at this, to start with c5. This is an equally good move order, and if you don't like so much to play against this in this c takes d4 scenario, then maybe c5 immediately is the better move, as white much more often plays e3 than c3 in this position. So e3 you can even consider taking now and go b6. It's really similar. White doesn't really have any great way to improve upon the moves that I just put on the board in the line before. So white will still play, let's say, this kind of moves. Oops, take here d3, c3, and so on. It's basically the same position. White doesn't have anything else or better, significantly better than these moves. And on c3 here, you can even think about other setups if you want. You can take and play queen b6. This is a rather interesting way to play this, attacking the pawn. And this can pretty quickly lead to a good position for black. One example being queen c2, which covers the pawn. Then knight c6 is a good idea, attacking on d4, e3, and now the very concrete move knight to b4. And this is in fact a bit annoying for white already, as this knight will go to d5. I'll give you one example, queen c1 and then knight to d5. Now this bishop is attacked and it needs to be moved. Let's say bishop here. Then black has the interesting possibility knight e4, which gets this idea into play, bishop b4 check. And you also threaten to take it. So white, I think, needs to react to both these ideas. You cannot simply develop. Yeah, you can, but it simply then you get the bishop as mentioned. Let's say here, and then the normal move. Yeah, and black has gained the bishop pair and managed to get some imbalance into the position. It's rather interesting to play in this way. This early c takes d4. So maybe this move order is a recommendation. What you always need to be cautious about is in these kind of setups, the queen b6 move, if the center situation hasn't been clarified. Here moves like knight a3 with this idea, or knight c3 are both very tricky. So this is really to be avoided, these early queen sorties to grab pawns. It's really a different story in this position, as the center is much more static now, and white really doesn't have such a comfortable move to play. If you go here, then it's interesting what black should play. He can take on b2, but this might get tricky after bishop d2. So it's always a bit risky, this kind of pawn grabs. Let's say here, rook b1, and maybe you need to go all the way back. And yeah, white has had some compensation for the pawn, so you need to be cautious. As mentioned, you can always play in the fashion that I described at the beginning, but this early c5 can be a good idea, as after e3 takes, you get the desired asymmetrical pawn structure, and after c3 you can still continue b6 and get to the first line that I showed. But this idea, as mentioned, is interesting to get a bit more, a trickier position, let's say, where white faces concrete problems. In this move order here, white also has alternatives like c3 and then bishop f4, and this isn't really a difference. You can still play b6 or c5. It's just the same if white plays bishop f4 later. And also we should look quickly at this move order. Again, if you're not playing g6 setups but e6, then you will probably play this move now, and e3, e6 or c5 will invariably transpose to what we looked at before, as white really doesn't have anything else than knight f3 in this position, or probably this move. But then you can also simply continue with b6 and bishop b7. It's not much of a difference, simply because where else should the knight go than to f3? So white will play this knight f3 move in the near future. It can play this, but now you really need to. And then after bishop e7, d3, and take here, or first this kind of stuff you can take again and have your desired position. I hope your desired is the right word. I like to play this this hedgehog setups in this structure. It's really a different story than the Sicilian hedgehog or the English hedgehog, where you need to be aware of the pressure on the d pawn and so on. This is not really happening here. Yeah, in fact, this is almost the end of the series. I thought 3 videos would be all right, and we have got everything covered. But then I actually remembered that probably I should do a 4th video, a quick one, which addresses other moves after 1d4, where white plays bishop f4 anyway, and this mostly covers stuff like d6, g6, and and probably even the Dutch. Yeah, but this will be in a 4th video that will complete this series. Yeah, I hope you enjoyed this look into Black's ideas in this line, and you're not afraid or annoyed about facing the London. It's often not much fun because it's so solid, so it's very difficult to break down. But if you know a good setup, and I hope I showed I demonstrated a couple, then you will get a fine position after the opening, and then you need to be patient and creative, and then you can still win the game, of course. Yeah, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it.